Dr. Tracey Wilen on the phone here, and welcome to Eye on the Community. I'm Gary Bell in Palm Springs, and Tracey is a prominent thought leader on the impact of technology on society, work, women's leadership, and careers, and she knows all about Gen Z women, and March is Women's History Month, so we're going to talk about Gen Z women. And what exactly are Gen Z women?
Well, Gary, and thank you for having me on your show. Gen Z is often referred to the tail end of the millennials. They're from age 20, some actually turning age 21 through age 9, where the millennials sort of overlap in age 20 and older. A lot of them are in middle school, high school, some are in college, and some are actually starting to work and starting to vote. So it's a large population, around 20 to 24% of the U.S., projected to grow up to 40% by 2020. And what sets them apart or makes them different is with every generation is not really the age, dates, and ranges, but more about what they have experienced in their short time on life and what they will bring to the workforce or to society. And this group has grown up with much more diversity, much more multicultural. In fact, over 50% have really come from a hybrid background. And they've grown up with cyber attacks, terrorism, cyclical recession, immersive technology. So it's a different, segment of the millennials.
They do things a lot different than we did back in our day.
Yes, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of changes or recommendations or inputs that they'll bring into the workforce that's different than the boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, millennials. It'll be quite interesting.
And I think there's a lot of, probably a lot more efficiency that goes on there than what went on back in our days.
Well, yes, actually, given their in-depth use of technology,
sure,
where we say like millennials use 2 devices or 2 screens, this generation has grown up using 5 devices or 5 screens.
Wow.
So they're much more familiar with it.
They can multitask 10 deep.
That's right. They said even like where millennials had an attention span of 8 seconds, this generation has an attention span of like 1 second.
That's great. Tell me a little bit about Women's History Month.
So Women's History Month, is interesting. Actually, it roots back to California from the research I've been looking at, and it started off as a day, and then it expanded into a week, and then it evolved into a month. And then Women's International Day is is March 8th, so that's past. But it's for the U.S., Australia, and the U.K., because my colleagues in Canada tell me Women's History Month is in October. But the gist of it is that we celebrate the contributions of women throughout the month, whether historically and in different areas. It could be from sports, it could be from sciences, it could be, in manufacturing or different verticals. But you'll see a lot of spots throughout the month, a lot of events, and a lot of celebrations about women's contributions.
How would you differ Gen Z from millennials in ways, like say, as far as jobs?
Sure. So Gen Z has been often described to be much more self-directed and concerned about their future, entrepreneurial, technical, and more pragmatic than the millennials. The millennials were more optimistic, team-oriented, although certainly Gen Z is a collaborative generation. But the perception is they'll be more independent and also more comfortable with the technologies. The use of social media is something that they not only use but understand how to collaborate with others. And a lot of times we look at the example of Modern Family because everyone seems to know the TV show where Alex Dunphy, the middle girl, is the Gen Z girl. She's very directed. She's very science, math focused. She's very determined to be successful, get into good schools, get a good career, where her older sister, Haley, is more of the millennial. She's not as focused on school, more concerned about her looks or how other people perceive her and her friends thinking about her and actually having to move back home. And I think a lot of Gen Zs have experienced not only watching their parents, who are boomers or Generation X, in and out of jobs, but then also seeing how their millennial siblings have actually had to move home and have exorbitant education debt. So they're determined to do things differently and be much more focused and frugal and pragmatic about their approach to their careers and education.
Yeah, they've already gone through the quasi-recession, depression, the outturn, so that has to affect them in some way.
Yes, and I think that this generation is, in most of the research, is saying that when they study them because they are in high school and colleges, they want to be entrepreneurs. This is the generation who's grown up seeing Shark Tank or seeing, Facebooks and Twitter having young people have these overnight, phenomenal, seemingly successful companies and taking control of their lives and making a lot of money. And so I think this whole concept of entrepreneurism and building their own businesses is something that this generation will bring to the workplace. In fact, many are developing their own kinds of companies, in their teens. They're already adults. I hear about 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds who are starting businesses, and it's quite phenomenal and exciting at the same time.
My boss's daughter is 12. She has a little bit of ADHD. She's really sharp, though, and she's focused. She's been wanting to start this company for about the last 3 years that I know of. And first it was just kind of a thing to do, and now she's getting really, really serious about it.
Yes, and I think what's exciting is they're seeing this, they're seeing in their lifetime other young people, extraordinary people, paving the way for them to create businesses in their own opportunities. And this excites them because it gives them a roadmap, and they can see how it's done, and they can be inspired by it. But I also think that the internet and technology facilitates this because there's marketplaces. I mean, people start businesses on eBay or Etsy or Zazzle, which previous generations we just didn't have this, so we couldn't. We had to really build brick and mortar types of businesses and try to find people to help us fund it. And today you have things like crowdfunding and more access to capital through other means than we did in the past.
My son's in his 20s. He was a food and beverage guy. He's been studying acting for about 10 years. He studied it in school, and he put together something online to get some money to people would sponsor him, and he got a scholarship to a school in New York, and he's living there, and he did all this, put it all together himself, something that I would have never have done.
No, it's pretty impressive when you put together, some of these unique, talented people with the technologies of today. They're creating things that we wouldn't even possibly think could happen years ago. And so that's why I think, a lot of this will map into future jobs and careers that we can't even imagine in the future, and they'll just create it.
Yeah, that is so cool. I wish that I would have been born in Gen Z. I've always been kind of a technological geek, and that would work really well for me. Unfortunately, I grew up back in the baby boomer days. So, yeah, things were a little bit different and quite a bit harder.
Yes, and the options were different. But then the younger generation would say, that was the generation that graduated either from high school or college and had one career for life, and they didn't have to worry, because companies took care of them, they trained them, they even funded their retirement. So, it's a half a dozen here or there.
Do you see Gen Zers working throughout their career in more jobs, or do you think they're going to adhere to either one job or one particular field through most of their career?
Well, if we just look at society in general, we're living longer, and this generation will certainly live to over 100. And interesting enough, if you can afford to live to 100, then you're probably going to have to work 50 to 70 years, which is very different than generations before. And the likelihood of a company lasting 50 to 70 years is much less likely today than perhaps in the past. And so just by default, they will have many jobs. Many of them do expect to not only hold many jobs, but maybe a few at the same time.
Yeah.
So just the whole approach is a little different.
I must have been ahead of my time, because I did that. I always had two to three jobs at the same time.
Yes, it's quite entrepreneurial and actually very positive that you thought that, because many people today who only thought about one career are sort of struggling with how do you make ends meet, because they're living longer than they expected perhaps, or their job ended sooner perhaps than they wanted.
And things have changed so much. I mean, when I got started in my business, I wanted to be a radio disc jockey. Well, nowadays a radio disc jockey is kind of unheard of.
Oh, I know. That whole entertainment industry is changed. And radio itself is, has moved online into social media. The studio has moved home in many cases, right? I mean, it's completely different than in the past.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to touch on real quick, Tracey. How do you see much difference between Gen Z women and Gen Z men? And if you do, what would that be?
Well, you know what's interesting is I'll go back to the Modern Family example because actually the brother of the two sisters is a Gen Z, and you can tell that he is very different from his sister Alex. He's technical, of course, but doesn't seem to have the same amount of focus as she does. So is that true in life? We have yet to see. What we do know about this generation is that they don't really see gender as an issue. In fact, a young Gen Z male wrote a book and said he asked his parents asked him to take his younger sister with him to his training, sports training, and he said no. And he said his parents got all over his case because he should be more embracing of gender. And he said it has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with the fact that she's going to beat me because she's bigger than me and better in sports. And so the point is that they don't even see gender in the way that previous older generations do at all. So it's just more of it's a group of people.
Oh, that's great. And they may be the saving grace for the world at this point because it's getting really scary out there.
Yeah, well, we can only hope. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that they're also a big fan of the Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
I love that show.
Yes, and I think a lot of people are really inspired by that. It's a great show and shows, I like it because it really highlights the math, science, engineering, technology, biology. It's really exciting for me.
And they also like Supergirl, which is an interesting show. I've watched that a few times. And so you got Homeland, Madam Secretary. It's just a ton of shows that seem to really appeal to them as well.
Well, there's different shows available today that they grow up with. They have different toys, more proactive. The Makers Movement is something that they have in school, which we didn't have, which is really bringing technology projects into the classroom and having, boys and girls both make things, whether it's 3D printing holiday cards to making LED dresses.
Wow.
The idea is that you're getting your hands on technology at a younger age. And I think that's a great idea. Wow.
Well, we are just about up at our 15-minute time, and God, I could have gone on another half hour talking to you about this. This is really amazing, and I've kind of studied some of this in the past with other generations, and it's good to see that these guys are going forward, and hopefully they'll be more successful than we were and help put the Earth on track. And having said that, Dr. Tracey Wilen, it's been great having you on Eye on the Community.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We've been talking to Tracey Wilen. Tracey is a doctor who deals with Gen Z women. It's Women's History Month. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this very enlightening. My name is Gary Bell. You're on Eye on the Community.